So about a month ago, I made a video talking about Arma 3. Not really anything specific about it, just why I think the game is special. And in the video, I mentioned user-created game modes, one of which being Antastasi, one of the biggest ones out there. I've played a lot of Antastasi in my day, and I mentioned in the video that if people are interested, I'll make an entire video about Antastasi. A sort of comprehensive gameplay guide for it. So that's what this is, a professional guide to Antastasi. Keep in mind, this isn't really a beginner guide. I'm not going to go over stuff about server hosting, port forwarding, community building, or the basics of Arma 3. But if you've played Antastasi a few times, you're gonna learn a new thing or two. I'm not just trying to show you how to play Antastasi, I'm trying to show you how to win Antastasi. Not just win, I mean win hard. Like 30-0, we don't stumble across the finish line, we win hard! Antastasi almost never gets the recognition it deserves for skill expression. Yeah, you can play this as casually as you want, that's kind of the beauty of Antastasi. But if you want to be really good at Antastasi, you can be really good. And that's what we're here to talk about today. If you want to see the basics of Antastasi, there's some really good tutorials on YouTube. But here we're going into it crazy style. So let's get started with the version you're playing. So back in my day, we had Antastasi missions, individual scenarios uploaded to the Arma 3 workshop that had the Antastasi mission in them. These were interesting because, well, people would modify them a lot. One person's version of Antastasi Livonia might be entirely different from another. The core concept still being Antastasi, but there might be some slight tweaks to how the game is played or even entire overhauls of mechanics. Nowadays, we certainly have it better. The Antastasi community team has come together and made Antastasi the mod. As opposed to being a scenario file that you download from the workshop, it's just one mod. The benefit to this is that now the factions on the map are no longer tied to that map and can be used on any map. Speaking of maps, you can use way more. All of this is on top of improvements of stability, mod compatibility, server hosting. Overall, this is an insane improvement to Antastasi, and it's what I'm using as a base for this video. Don't worry, I'll go over the forks for it later. So, we were talking about mods a second ago, and this is Arma 3. I would kind of be appalled if you were playing Antastasi with just the Antastasi mod. So for the sake of the video, we're going to set up a simple mod pack. This here is what I expect your mod pack to look like at the simplest level. Antastasi, Ace, and some kind of radio mod. It can be TFAR Beta, it can be the old TFAR, Acre, it doesn't matter, some kind of radio mod. And CBA just for the codebase. I always recommend playing with Ace. It expands your possibilities and your strategies tenfold. If the medical system really turns you away that much, you can make some tweaks to it, but I recommend playing with it. And the reason I recommend a radio mod is because if you have over 8 people all yelling over each other in Discord, comms break down more than they would if you had the radio mods. Ask me how I know, I dare you. Plus, the radios add their own difficulties and challenges exclusive to Antastasi, and what's the point in getting better if not to challenge yourself? So now we're in the mission creation stage. After selecting your favorite supported map, you, who watched this video and knows what you're doing, pick the commander slot. You are going to be the one to change mission parameters and set up the mission for people to play. Name the save and head over to the Factions tab. Here's where you will pick the faction that you will be fighting the most and the faction that's invading and fighting the other faction. By default, you don't have a lot of options, and we'll talk about modded factions later. For now, just pick what makes sense or what you want to see the most. Keep in mind, the occupant faction is going to be the loot that you're looting the most. So if you don't want to play with British gear, don't fight the British. For now, let's pretend these buttons don't even exist. As for the DLC, if the majority of your players have Arma 3 DLC, I recommend clicking these on. At the most, it'll affect some of the civilian vehicle spawns, and at the very least, they're cosmetic features that you can unequip. Now on to the parameters, because these are important. I'm assuming we're playing Rebel versus Gov versus Invaders. This is the default game mode for Antastasi, having you fight the government that's also fighting an invading faction. Rebel versus Government is its own thing with its own quirks, and I highly recommend trying it out at some point. If you're running a server with a lot of people that you don't know, I recommend enabling the server membership. This allows you to prevent players from stealing rare items that you might find, as well as preventing idiots from running away with javelins that they'll lose because they're idiots. Same thing with the team kill punishment. Again, idiot prevention. There's a lot of settings you can go and look through in here, and I highly recommend playing with them. A lot of this comes down to balancing. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, Antastasi can be extremely casual or super hardcore. This is how you can change that without extra mods or just upping the AI difficulty. I really recommend changing stuff up over time. If you beat a couple Antastasis and you're starting to think it's getting too easy, change how many items you need to get them permanently. Turn off weapons unlocking standard magazines. Turn off rocket launcher unlocking. Turn off fast travel. Things like this will increase difficulty without just making the AI crack shots. Now that you've spent 15 minutes picking out the map you're going to play on, the faction you're going to fight, and the mission parameters, you want to start looking for where you're going to place your base. There's a lot of very important things to consider when doing this. As you can see, the map will tell you when you're in range of something like an occupied town or outpost. Enemies will patrol these areas, so you obviously don't want to put it there, but sometimes it requires some extra thought. Here's a little example base. It's got a nice dirt road behind it, some buildings for cover and hiding in, and it's right next to the main road, so you can get to missions easily. Hey, where's that convoy going? Do you see the problem with that? While you can go undercover, and I recommend you use that to your full potential, Petros is right there in the open, and anyone who isn't undercover is just gonna get filled with bullets. Hey, I'd even argue for putting your base not connected to a road at all. Yeah, you'll lose undercover if you're off-road long enough, but if you can get to a road fast enough, it's 100% viable. And enemies can't just drive up to your base. So, you've set up your mod pack, your terrain, your factions, your parameters, your base location. Now what?
What do you mean? Now we can finally play the game. Oh yeah.
Now you're actually anteing your Stasi. So where do we start? Well, before you think about doing anything, you need money. You use money to buy vehicles, which get you around the map to kill things to get more vehicles. For new and returning players alike, I refer you all to this image. Screenshot it, print it out, hang it on your wall, make a shirt out of it, I don't care. Just remember this image. Antastasi is like your headquarters. No matter which way you flip it, the resources come first. This is because the resource markers on the map give you passive income when you take them. You'll find these scattered all around the map, as well as the more rare factory. Controlling the civilian infrastructure on the map you're trying to take will lead you to financial success, which in turn leads to military success. But this isn't the only thing you can do for money. See, a lot of people forget that you can actually request missions from Petros that are far simpler than capturing any kind of resource. Let's take this mission for example. Destroy a police station. Instead of planning an entire attack on a resource, let's grab an off-road, throw an IED in it, put a detonator in there, kaboom. Remember, you're not terrorists, you're freedom fighters. This is where that whole open-ended nature of Antastasi comes from that people really enjoy. The game doesn't tell you how to destroy it just says destroy it, allowing you to use any method you'd like. This applies to literally everything else in Antastasi. I'm gonna get way more into that in the Antastasi tactics section of the video, but it's important to remember that you can do things whatever way you'd like. While we were on the topic of civilian infrastructure, there's one more thing you have to capture, and that's towns. You see, towns aren't captured the same way anything else is in Antastasi. To capture a town, they need to support you. You can't take it through military action. If you want a town to support you, you need to deliver them resources, destroy nearby radio towers, and destroy nearby outposts. The latter of which are interesting. These will be your first full-scale military engagements. You might run into things like roadblocks or patrols, but these will be the first military points you take. When it comes to resources and factories, they actually have people inside that you have to keep alive. If they die, then the place has to be rebuilt. This does limit your options when it comes to taking these points, but when it comes to outposts, total decimation is on the table. Obviously, you want to be a little bit careful because of the box, but if you don't care about the box, you can destroy it in whatever way you want. For those who aren't aware, the box will usually hold loot from that faction inside of it. However, it will also have some random little tidbits from other factions on the map, whether they be you or the enemy. In my opinion, these are almost always worth looting, not just for the guns, but for the explosives as well. We'll talk about bomb theory a little bit later in the video, but just know that I do recommend picking up these boxes. So you've killed everyone at your very first outpost. Now what? Well, let's take the flag, making it our outpost. This expands our territory and makes sure that nearby towns like us a little bit more. What's our next step? Defend against the QRF. Yeah, every time you take one of these, the military are going to try and take it back from you immediately. Sometimes it's just some infantry, sometimes it'll be an attack helicopter. It all depends on your war level, so pay attention to that. After you've successfully defended yourselves, now is when you can start looting. Head to the flag and buy a loot box. This little doohickey allows you to run around and collect loot from dead bodies and anything anyone may have dropped. This makes it way easier than what you used to have to do, where you had to manually pick up everything you wanted to loot. Once you got everything you want, press Y and garage the quote-unquote vehicle to save the loot box. Now when it comes to the box, you have two options. The quick one would be to load it into an off-road and take it home. This is fast and simple, but you run run the risk of dying with it on the road. If you don't have a radio to inform your team of where you died, you may lose that loot box just because you can't find it again. Option 2 sucks, but it's viable. Buy a loot box and start emptying the box. Just drop everything on the ground. This is extremely time consuming, and with Arma's UI, it just kinda sucks. Plus, depending on your loot box settings, this might not even work depending on what the max weapons you can put into a loot box is. But if it's a high enough number, this could be worth it if you have an extremely long drive back to base. Now, once you got the loot, we want to make sure we don't lose the spot again. So I mentioned what each marker gives you. Resources give you money, factories multiply that money, but what do towns give you? Well, towns do give you a tiny amount of money, but they also give you manpower. This is the resource you're going to be using to reinforce your bases. The commander can add garrisons to places you've captured. This will spawn groups of AI dynamically with the mission, meaning that if you're very far away from them, they're not going to be eating up server resources. But if the outpost is under attack, they will be there to defend it. People tend to only use the AI when they're playing solo, but I highly recommend using this in any setting. Using these guys is extremely helpful to anyone who has the opportunity. I highly recommend going and looking at some videos on YouTube of how to use the Arma AI and high command menu, because even if you're playing with a large group, players who know how to do this can have a loyal group to them at all times. So you're probably asking yourself, Manic, why have you spent so much time just talking about the outposts? I did briefly go over the other things you need to be aware of, but the reason I spent so much time on the outposts is because this is the bread and butter of what you're doing in Antistasi. Assault, loot, defend, repeat. Once you can start doing this efficiently, you can start thinking about the mid game. Remember, Antastasi is not as mindless as people think it is. There is good reason in watching your aggression levels and making sure you can keep that as low as possible. In the early game, you're pretty much free to just focus on procuring resources, getting towns to your side, and taking outposts. These are things small groups of players can do on their own. If you're on a larger server with 10 to 20 people, people can split up and do all of this at the same time. Where if you're in a smaller group with 5 to 8 people, you can just bounce around doing these pretty easily. It will get harder as the enemy aggression goes up, but if you're staying consistent, you'll be able to work this out pretty well. But eventually, you're gonna run into a roadblock. No, not an actual roadblock, something scarier than an outpost. A seaport. See, the fun thing about the seaports is that the military wants to obliterate you for taking them. Seaports are where you start to hit the mid-game of Antastasi. While all they do is boost your HR and decrease the price of vehicles, they're one of those large defended structures that will really test your skill. And as you're taking more of these structures, you're gonna start getting closer and closer to the structure that gets you into the late game. So the closer you get, you're gonna have to lock in more and more. And this is the part of the video that's really gonna separate us from the basics of Antastasi. Now, the more casual players are gonna roll their eyes, but the ears on more veteran players might perk up a bit. I'm gonna start talking about strategy. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about simulating what real-life militaries do. I'm talking about strategies that work within Arma 3. If the goal is to complete the game with the least amount of deaths as possible, you're gonna have to think a little bit more when it comes to your assaults. And even if you're not really keeping track of how often you're dying, nobody likes being unconscious and staring at a black screen for 5 minutes. So let's lock in and talk about one of the first things that I think everyone's gonna learn after their first Antastasi. You need to avoid gear fear. See, no matter what, you're probably gonna start with the stuff that isn't the greatest. Even if you have infinite weapons on at a certain point, it's still worth using them to get ahead. Don't be the guy who joins your team to assault a major point of interest with the worst gear possible. If you're really worried about losing your stuff, bringing the best gear to ensure that you complete the mission properly would make the most sense. And speaking of proper gear, team roles aren't even the worst idea in Antastasi. Let's say you have 10 players on a server, including you, the commander. Let's split them into 2 teams of 5. Let's take a look at team 1. Let's give one guy the role of a team leader with a grenade launcher, one guy with anti-tank, 2 machine gunners, and a distinctly dressed medic. Now let's take a look over here at team 2. Again, same thing. Team lead, AT, machine gunner, marksman, medic. Now we didn't exactly mirror the other team, and that's because you don't necessarily have to. See, assuming everyone's attacking the same point, or at least on the same objective, all you need is everyone to be able to do their roles. Machine gunners can machine gun and suppress targets and stop them from moving and shooting back. Yes, suppression is actually a mechanic in Arma 3. Yes, they will shoot back at you, but their aim is going to be far worse. The AT or anti-tank guys can take out tanks, IFVs, even armored cars cars. Anything that poses a threat to you that your bullets can't solve. Marksmen are far more situational, being able to reach out and poke enemies that a normal rifle can't reach. While these don't fit into everything, when you want one, you really do want one. And medics take time to focus on the injured, especially if you're running ace medical. This is very important, usually taking people out of combat or waiting till there's some kind of break in the firefight to heal people and bring them back awake, and a team leader to coordinate and command the team. If you're short on radios, you'd usually give the 2 team leaders the radios so they could talk between the 2. Now, you may be asking, what's preventing me from being John Arma, with a machine gun, an AT stick, tons of medical supplies, explosives, all the ammo I could ever need, and one-man armying my way through everything? Well, remember how I mentioned at the beginning of the video that Antastasi is as casual or hardcore as you make it? You don't exactly need to use these kind of tactics if you have infinite weapons, infinite stamina, no ace medical, stuff like that, because they're kinda just base Arma strategies. The reason I'm showing you them is because when you start playing more difficult versions of Antastasi, this kind of thing really helps. But these are Arma strategies. Let's talk about Antastasi strategies. Now, with Antastasi being one of the most unique game modes for Arma 3, there's obviously some very unique strategies you can use for this. The whole last section was talking about real strategies that work in a almost milsim aspect. But sometimes working as an irregular militia, you have to do irregular things. When it comes to completing the missions that Petros gives you, these kind of things can be extremely helpful. What you're seeing on screen is one of my favorite strategies. It's called the dig a giant trench on the road because the AI literally cannot path around it strategy. See, it's not exactly cheating, and it's only kind of abusing a bug, but these kind of things are what make Antastasi very special to me. Let's take a look at another one. You know how Antastasi has an undercover system that most people forget about by war level 3? I call this the I can't believe it's undercover. As long as you're not actively shooting people, you can be undercover in the back of an off-road, fully geared with a gun pointed at someone. This practically trivializes the kill the traitor missions. The whole undercover mechanic by itself is kinda busted. If you need better gear right at the beginning, or you want to go straight from your base to assaulting an outpost, I recommend sticking a gun in your uniform and then just pulling it out when you need to. That way you can be entirely undercover and still able to sneak your way into a town and get the jump on your enemy. This kind of thing is what pulls together the whole dynamic guerrilla fighter thing, and it amazes me how well it works. And there's something that I've been really debating putting in this video, just because I know how YouTube is. But I love you guys, and I love this game mode, so we're gonna talk about bomb theory. And I feel like I definitely need to make this point again. You're not terrorists. You lose for killing civilians. You lose for killing surrendered combatants. You are freedom fighters. That being said, the humble car bomb is extremely underrated. Here's how you do it. Take a car, fill it full of any infinite ammo and grenades you have, and stick some kind of explosive to the front of it. Keep in mind, once you place that explosive, you're not going to be undercover anymore. But when you get in the car, you're undercover. You'll have to detonate it manually because the mod devs took out the dead man switch. You don't have to be in the car when it explodes, but you know, if you want the job done right, you know how it goes. And this is a genuinely viable strategy in the early game. This is because of how Ace's cook-off mechanics work. Now, this only works if you have Ace installed, but if you have explosives and ammo and things like that inside a vehicle, they'll pop and explode while the vehicle's on fire. This will distract, damage, suppress, and even kill nearby enemies. A functional car bomb can act as a very terrible fighting force, but depending on how much your off-roads are, that's not bad. Let's get more stupid with it though. Grab a helicopter that can sling load and do the exact same thing, just forget the explosive. Most factions have at least one helicopter that can do this, but no helicopters with bombs. So fly over your target, drop the off-road, and watch it explode on impact. Now, I'll admit this is a stupid idea, and I've used it maybe once, but they get worse, I promise. Let's do the same thing. Let's take our Chinook, let's take a technical. Now you have a flying machine gun. This does technically work without mods. It's just that most of the unmodded helicopters that can do this have giant miniguns on the side that don't expose you to everything else. So under the right conditions, it works. But let's remove the car from the equation entirely. I need to be very careful with how I word this, but you can just keep the IED in your backpack and link it that way. Now granted, this only works if you have the dead man switch, which you don't get infinite of at the beginning. But if you get your hands on them, this can work. Just keep some spacing from your teammates, they'll surely thank you. This is why I was advising you to keep your explosives at the beginning of the game, because the idea of putting bombs on roadways to take out convoys, reinforcements, anything like that works incredibly well, and I never see people do it. But now that you got all that down, you should be ready to enter the endgame. And how do you do that? Well, it's by seizing your first airfield. See, taking an airfield is no small cookie. They are the endgame points on the map. They are the most defended. They'll have the most aggressive reinforcements. You'll be fighting armor, tons of infantry, air, both helicopters and jets. It is a pain to take these. So let's take them the professional way. Let's start by figuring out what we're using for the attack. Remember that whole thing I said about gear fear? Yeah, that's gotta go like now. You want to use your best vehicles for this. If you have stolen attack helicopters, use them. If you have tanks, use them. If you have APCs, use them. Use everything you can to get an advantage. Put AI squad members into the car before you so you can control the gun and drive at the same time. If you're short on players, this is an absolute lifesaver. This is also a great time to use up your HR that you've been building. Pay for an entire squad to fight for you. Yeah, they might not be as effective as players, but they're still something. Use what you have to your full advantage. I was gonna have a whole segment on why you should use IFVs and APCs and stuff, but like, duh. While you might lose your armor and your air, it's still useful. If anything, you'll go down fighting. But let's hold our horses for a second. Let's look at the vehicles we can buy. You see that there? Let's use that. Let's put it in off-road. Let's put it in a secluded area nearby where we're attacking. You've now turned Arma 3 into a point-and-click adventure game. While this won't kill everything down there, it will immensely soften up your targets, making this way easier. Never underestimate indirect fire. Just a word of note, do not fire it from your base, they will come and kill Petras. So after applying everything I've taught you in this video so far, you've successfully taken your very first airfield. You are now in Antastasi's endgame. This is what separates the boys from the men. You will panic every time the enemy tries to take that airfield back. This is when you want to start trying to end the game as fast as possible and take the rest of the airfields. And with your newly acquired tools, that shouldn't be too impossible. Remember, the enemy have a certain amount of resources they can throw at you. So if you want to take things slow, you can, but if you want to completely overwhelm them and blitz your way through the rest of the map, that's entirely possible. I recommend that if you're incredibly sick of the faction you're fighting. This is also about the point in the game where you're probably encountering the invading faction. Depending on the map, they usually don't get very far, and that could be because you just blitz through the map way too quickly, or because they're a terrible matchup against the occupying faction. Ultimately though, you're probably wrapping things up around this point. At this point, you probably have your own roadblocks set up around the map, your own troops defending outposts, and you're attacking the last airfield. Once you take that, you've won Antistasi. As long as you have more than 70% of support from towns and all the airfields, you'll win. That's it. That's Antistasi. You won. Now what? Well, as I mentioned towards the setup portion of the video, I would definitely recommend playing with new factions. Antastasi community supports RHS, Cup, 3CB, and I believe Aegis, and they definitely change up the game more than you think they would. I always preferred fighting the Russians as the occupiers, because looting garbage AKs is way more difficult than looting M4s with optic setups and suppressors. If you really want to change up how you play the game, I highly recommend turning on no unlocks in the parameter settings. This will have you using a much more wide variety of stuff you normally wouldn't. The whole thing really boils down to this meme, I'm not even kidding. But if you know Antastasi, you know we're not done. Not even close. So at the beginning of the video, I was talking about how Antastasi used to be missions and now it's a mod by the Antastasi community team. Well, not long after that mod got released, several forks of it were made. The first one was Antastasi Plus. Now there were Antastasi Plus missions back in the day, but now it has the benefit of the standalone mod, just like Antastasi community. So what does Antastasi Plus add? Well, Antastasi Plus adds the arms dealer, a vendor that you can go buy and sell weapons from, as well as the vehicle black market doing the same thing but for vehicles. It adds a bunch of additions to the commander tab, further customization of rebel loadouts, more crate and commander abilities, new marker types, military administration, and military bases, random events like civilian helicopters to trip you up and make you think you're under attack, drone strikes, which do mean you're under attack, roving mortars, 10 new mission types, including salvage missions, preventing artillery strikes, ambushes, seizing airdrops, rescuing rebel informers, persistent roadblocks, watch posts, AA and AT emplacements, a rally point that you can spawn on that your commander can place down, persistent save for constructions allowing you to build fortifications, more commander abilities like smoke barrages, flare barrages, vehicle drops, recon planes, chemical airstrikes, the ability to summon a random halo drop allowing the commander and his team to drop in from the sky, a rival guerrilla faction paid for by the invaders to fight you, a hostile chemical airstrike to hit you, mechanized QRFs and howitzers, a million quality of life things. So obviously this is the one you want to play, right? Well, obviously all of those are great features, I'm not doubting that. And I'm not gonna say that Antastasi Plus is bad and outdated, but I am gonna say it's outdated. See, Antastasi Plus falls far behind in things like documentation and mod compatibility. And this wouldn't be a problem if the other fork didn't exist. You see, there's another fork of Antastasi that a lot of people point to as the almost default for Antastasi nowadays, and that's Antastasi Ultimate. See, it took me a while to figure out how to actually kind of explain this to people. Antastasi Ultimate is what the Calamity mod is to Terraria. See, technically, this is a fork of Antastasi Plus, so all the things I just mentioned are included in this. On the Steam page, Antastasi Ultimate says it supports 25 new factions, 50 plus new maps, more quality of life features, new optional victory and loss conditions, a complete rework of the arms dealer, more settings, more player slots. And while that is all true, that does not do this justice. Not even a little. Grab your popcorn, I got more to talk about. You can now interact with civilians, improved garrisons, extended modability allowing you to use far more mods with this mod. You can have zombies instead of civilians. A million bug fixes that I thank every day for because this game's not stable. And you can change just about any aspect of the vanilla mod, making this way harder or way easier. That, on top of the 25 new factions, leaves every playthrough with this mod unique. Although, it's not 25 new factions. It's 25 new mod sets. How many new factions are there? Well, there's the Russian Federation, CDF, US Army, and USMC, GSB, Britain, AAF, Russian Federation, ARD, CDF, LDF, RACS, SLA, AAF, Germany, Czech Republic, Britain, ION, US Army, USMC, Federal Republic of Australia, Spain, Italy, Sweden, MNGC, Norway, Spain, North Lombacan Armed Forces, South Lombacan Defense Forces, AAF and TF Aegis, FIA, Raven PMC, the Republic, the CIS, Deathwatch, Mandalorians, Galactic Empire, Rebel Alliance, Rex's Clone Uprising, USNC, Covenant Insurrectionists, The Flood, Android Army, Vanguard, Replicas, Wehrmacht, Africa Corps, Red Army, US Army, Imperial Japan, US Army, PAVN, Viet Cong, USSR, TDF, US Army, BAF, Clear Sky, Freedom, Monolith, Ecologist, Loner, Bandit, Duty, and Zombies. And this list isn't even up to date, man. Seriously, your possibilities are limitless with this. You can technically mix and match these. You shouldn't, but you can. That, paired with how customizable the game parameters are, make this game insanely replayable. Oh my god, I haven't even talked about parameters yet. Okay, so look, at the beginning of the video, talking about Antastasi community, I showed off some of the parameters you can change. Let's take a look at Ultimates. Ultimates gives you so much more you can play with. Being able to change things like your balancing, the enemy balancing, fog of war, so you actually have to scout out where the enemies are. You can use this to make the game as hard or as easy as you want, and one of the big things that helps with that is the arms dealer. One of my biggest criticisms with Antastasi has always been that Arma has so much content that you don't get to see through Antastasi. Well, with the arms dealer, you can go there and buy and sell just about any weapon you can think of. And what makes this even better than the Antastasi Plus version is that it's dynamic. These will change both in price and availability as your campaign goes on. Same thing with the vehicle black market. Instead of being able to buy super OP vehicles right from your base, you have to have certain map markers unlocked like factories, military bases, or airports, and you have to go all the way out to the arms dealer. If you want to make this a far more difficult but immersive experience, turn off fast traveling altogether. It doesn't matter if you still have weapon unlocks on. The idea of illegally running guns back to your base from the arms dealer trying not to get caught by the military is an extremely fun scenario. But I have another Antastasi professional tip for you guys. It's called kidnapping. So you can handcuff just about any NPC as long as they're not actively shooting at you. And I guess the Antastasi Ultimate devs either didn't expect you to try and kidnap the arms dealer, or were just thinking, nah, if they thought of this, they earned it. So you can take him, put him in a car or a helicopter, whatever, and just bring him back to your base. Now Petros has a friend. Look how happy he is. I don't know how many times I mentioned at this point, but that's the open-ended approach to Antastasi that everyone loves so much. Your restrictions cause more creative solutions. So just to recap, we know that we can change just about anything we want with the mission parameters, making the game easier or harder. Obviously, you can mix and match that with your base Arma difficulty settings, getting rid of things like your crosshair, HUD elements, and showing your position on the map. But there's one more thing we can do to customize our experience even further, and that's mods. Now you might be saying, Manic, didn't you already cover mods? That was the whole point of the factions thing. And while yes, those are mods, those are more along the lines of content mods. They add things like weapons, vehicles, and uniforms to the game, where the mods I'm talking about change little aspects. For example, a mod you'll almost never see people run without is enhanced movement. See, enhanced movement allows you to do things like climb up onto objects or vault over them more easily. See, Arma 3 already already has a built-in vault mechanic, but to be honest, it kinda sucks. Certain purists will say that you shouldn't load the mod because people will climb up where they shouldn't be and get themselves killed. That's less of a mod issue and more of a stupidity issue. I kinda wanna keep it rolling. DUI Squad Radar adds this little thing to the bottom of your screen, acting as a simple compass and a manager for your team. Some people say this is too arcadey or too much HUD clutter. Personally, I disagree. I think this makes up for the fact that you don't have the same amount of spatial awareness in video games that you do in real life. It also allows you to color code your team, making for way easier team management. Suppressed by Laxman adds several screen effects while being, well, suppressed. You can't actually put the fear of dying in your players, no matter how bad I want to. What this mod does instead is it makes it harder to acquire your targets when shooting back. But if you know where they are already, you still can fire back. Very similar to what happens to the AI when you suppress them, like I was talking about earlier in the video. In my research, players who are affected by this mod die less because they stick their head out of cover less. Cat Medical can certainly be more of a divisive mod, but it greatly expands on the ACE medical system already present within ACE, adding several more things to treat if someone goes unconscious, as well as a plethora of new ways to treat them. This can be a benefit at times, allowing you to give a player ammonium carbonate to wake them up if they're stable. This is definitely a fun choice if you want more of a challenge, or have a lot of players that are really into in-depth medical systems. Advanced sling loading is a little OP, but it's also really cool. Despite the name Advanced, it's actually a pretty simple mod that allows you to sling load vehicles and objects to helicopters, allowing you to do really cool maneuvers like moving your buddies in a car by carrying it with a helicopter, or even picking up the box from an outpost with a helicopter. Like I mentioned in the bomb theory section of the video, you can use this to drop cars on your enemies. It's a really cool system. I highly recommend trying it out. I really recommend you start experimenting with mods eventually. Yeah, a lot of them will break Antistasi, but if you know how Arma mods work, you could pretty easily figure out which ones do and don't work. I've been considering making an entire video dedicated to Arma 3 mods and the modding community, but it's partially because this entire video was born because of Arma's modding community. I've thought about how to word this for a very long time, but I think, looking at Antastasi, it is almost the perfect embodiment of the Arma 3 modding community, with how many people have come together to get this functional, to the massive community based around modding this mod. You can see a lot of resemblance between Antastasi and DayZ, despite the gameplay not even being close to the same. But you can see that evolution, that community effort. Hundreds, almost thousands of people asking for this community game mode to be a default game mode in Arma 4. I don't know, it's one of those things that's just very difficult to put into words. So maybe it's better if I leave you with a story. I want to say about 6 years ago, we were playing a map called Taviana. Hard to find on the workshop nowadays, it gets taken down all the time. But we had a mission in this big city, this big beautiful city in one of the corners of the map. And the city had this big town square that we drove through. We got lit up by the military. We ended up hiding in this kind of city halls type building, and only 2 of us had survived. Our last 2 survivors were held up in the building just trying to fight off the military as long as they could. The 2 people who respawned were bringing them ammo and medical supplies until they could clear out the roadblocks to escape. So for like an hour, we were driving 10-15 minutes back to the spot with more ammo and more medical supplies until we got enough of a break in the fight to actually get them out of there. And then we had our chance and we had this sick getaway with bullets constantly whizzing by our car and hitting the sides, and it was just such a memorable moment. All dynamic, no scripting, no planning. And that's why I love Antastasi. If you want to experience some of these kind of things for yourself, come join our Discord. We're running a super hardcore Antastasi this Friday, the 22nd. We're also just running a bunch of other games in there. We have fun. Come join. Huge thank you to my channel members, and huge shout out to my GOAT tier supporters, Ness, Young Cheesa, and Tessa. And a big shout out to my Patreon $5 member, Tessa. Thank you for watching this far into the video. I love you all, and I will see you next time.